Now, one of the main roles of the Children's Authority is to manage the foster care system. During Child Abuse Prevention Month, the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago is not only focusing on the prevention of child abuse, but on how children can remain with their families. The Children's Authority notes that kinship foster care is one such way, and this morning we're going to be talking to team lead at the foster care unit, Anjuli Tawari Defarge, and Children's Services Associate at the foster care unit, Avion Thompson, about this issue. Good morning, ladies.
Hi, good morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm fine.
Nice. So I'm coming to you first, Mrs. Defarge. The difference between foster care and kinship care. Tell us about the both of them.
Sure, no problem. So a lot of persons don't know that foster care is actually the temporary care of children. So if a child needs to be removed from their home because we're doing investigations or there's abuse allegations, we would remove that child and place them in a temporary alternative care option. And that would be foster parents. These persons can do short-term, long-term, specialist foster care for our children with additional needs. But what we're actually focusing on this month, and we're really sort of formalizing it throughout Trinidad and Tobago, is kinship foster care. And that's a little bit different. So whereas foster care deals with volunteers from the public coming forward, they may not have a relationship with the child coming into their home. Kinship foster care, we are appealing to family members to come forward. You may know a family member, child who's in the system, who's in one of the children's homes, in foster care, and you can step forward and actually, with the support of the Children's Authority, through assessment and vetting and training, you can be approved as a kinship foster care, and with our support, you can care for that child.
Now, to confirm, the foster care system is different from the homes that we see. Is it a different system?
Yes, definitely. So the children's homes are what we call our care institutions. So those are much larger. You know, there's different staff coming in. Foster homes are actually families, just your average mother, father, you know, single parents who can actually care for children and provide for their basic needs.
Right. And this foster care system, it doesn't have to be a blood relative of yours. Once you have a family, you can enter the foster care system and adopt, or is adoption something different as well?
Totally different. You just hit me with three different things. So if it is that you do have a relative in the system, and now I want to be very clear, the Section 3 of the Children's Authority Act actually defines who relative is. So that's actually defined and inclusive of a step-parent, a grandparent, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, whole or half blood.
Right.
So once you are one of those in that category of relative, we can actually assess and approve you to care for a child who is a relative of yours. Different from adoption.
Right.
Adoption is something completely separate from foster care, whereas foster care is temporary because we are working in the background trying to place children back with their parents or birth homes, versus adoption, which is permanent. So once a child enters an adoptive home, that child permanently stays there. So there is a difference. And in Trinidad and Tobago, we mix it up all the time.
Yeah, because we often use the words interchangeably.
Exactly.
And so I wanted to get that clear, that it's a totally different process.
Yeah, and similarly, kinship foster care. So even though we're placing a relative with you, we are still working in the background trying to build capacity within the families, help those parents get back on their feet, so eventually that child can be returned to their care.
Yeah. Avion, I'm coming to you because I'm also wondering who would qualify for that sort of kinship foster care.
Okay, great question. And just as my colleague would have stated that who qualifies as any relative of the child who, inclusive of a grandparent, step-parent, also a brother or sister, whether be whole or of half-blood. And those persons can come forward to the authority and state that whether they have a child, whether it be in an institution, and they would like to care for that child and go through the process of becoming a kinship foster parent to that relative.
Yeah. And in terms of qualifying as well, let's look at also the criteria. Does the person need to make a certain amount in salary? Does it have to be a nuclear family versus a single parent? I mean, what sort of criteria do you look for?
Well, there are four main criteria. One is the person must be financially stable to care for themselves on their own. They must be willing and able to adequately provide that care and also follow through with the support and the training that the foster care unit would be providing to the kinship foster parent, as well as be able to provide adequate accommodations for the child based on their age and gender as well. And also they must be, again, have to be willing to provide that support. They have to be able to provide that care for the child, and they have to be, again, able and willing to.
Yeah. And in terms of the age of the child, is there a cutoff age or is there a range where a child can be entered into the kinship foster care system?
There is no age limit. Once the child is a ward of the state at one of the institutions, the relative can come forward and request to be a kinship foster parent of that child.
Yeah. Now, one of the things you mentioned, Anjuli, was that training that takes place. What sort of training an interested party may have to undergo if they're thinking about that sort of foster care?
So once a relative comes forward and expresses interest, we would then sort of give them that basic training with regards to caring, because they may have never cared for a child before, but they want to. Yes. That willingness is there. So we look at things like child development, behavior management, child protection, child safety, looking after the basic medical needs. So whilst it's not intense parenting, it is a sort of parenting training, trying to help them meet the needs of that child in their care, because we don't want to give them a disadvantage. We really are supporting and promoting family placement for these children. It's really a less traumatic transition for children when they have to be removed from their homes, obviously, and that's what foster care is about, placing a child in a family environment, whereas kinship foster care is that step further. We're placing you back into your family with relatives who can care for you. But I want to just underline something Avion said earlier. You have to be willing to work with us. Mm-hmm. That's one of the key things. You can't just say, I'm a relative, I'm guaranteed this child. You have to be assessed. You have to meet our criteria. You have to prove that you can care for this child and the risk of abuse is no longer there. The reason why we removed the child in the first place is no longer present. Mm-hmm. And that's where you would really qualify to become a kinship foster parent.
So you just hit me with a bunch of things as well, and some things came to mind. So let's look at assessment first.
Yes.
What sort of strict, or is there going to be some sort of strict guidelines that the authority uses to assess these people who come forward for this type of foster care?
Sure. So foster care is legally mandated. We do have legislative requirements to meet. So we go into the homes, we do in-depth interviews with the members of the household, whether it's adults, grandparents, children in the home. We do community inquiries. We do a home assessment to make sure the environment is safe. We actually require all adults in the home to submit police certificates of character. We do a financial assessment to make sure that you can financially meet your own needs, because what is important to note in kinship foster care, you do receive a stipend for the care of the child. We want to make sure people aren't coming for us to abuse the system and use that money for their own needs. So you have to be able to prove that you can financially meet your own needs. And along those lines, we're basically looking at character with the community inquiries is a big part. You know, your support persons, who have you identified who can support you in caring for this child? So that's all part of our assessment, and that actually goes before our board for approval before we can place a child. So it's not a guarantee. People need to understand that they need to work with us. You're signing up for caring for this child, so you're also signing up to work with us.
And I'm glad that you made that clear. Avian, I'm coming to you because I know that one of the things we've been talking about for this particular foster care is family. What is the definition of a family? Does it have to be the nuclear? Can it be the extended? Can it be the single parent? So, and then is there a preference if you have more adults in the home versus if you're a single parent who want to adopt? Well, who wants to foster, temporarily house this child until we return them back to the family?
Sure. As we know, in Trinidad and Tobago, we have different versions of family, many different versions, but it is right now in kinship, for kinship foster care. We, again, the family we're looking for right now is for, again, the grandparents, the step-parents, the brother or sister, whether it be whole or half-blood for now. I guess more further legislative reform is going to happen for us to extend to other family members. And regarding the other part of your question in terms of the type of family, so for example, if a grandparent wants to become a kinship foster parent towards for their whether it be granddaughter or grandson, and they have other relatives in home, just as my colleague would have stated, they would have to be a part of the process. They would not have the title of kinship foster parent, but they would have the title of the support person, providing that support, whether it be assisting with taking them to school, taking them to medical appointments, and just simple babysitting duties if the kinship foster parent has to do other duties outside of the home.
Yeah. And what type of support would the authority give to the foster parents? So you mentioned, and Julie, working with them at least before the process started in terms of, getting those child development courses, the training, that kind of thing. But after this child is relocated into the home, does the authority still check in? Do they offer that kind of support? And anybody can take this question.
Sure, yes. We do provide case management for the child or children once they are placed in kinship foster care. And that case management entails monitoring, whether it be through phone calls or in-person home visits. That can be school visits as well, to ensure that the child or children are going to school, meeting their educational needs. The psychosocial support for the child in terms of if there are any further or additional interventions that the child may need, as well as that support to the kinship foster parents as well. For example, if they're feeling overwhelmed or if they're unsure about anything. So it's a team that we are building. So it's not that when the child is placed that they are left to fend for themselves, but it's a teamwork, and we do work with the kinship foster parents very closely. And at no point in time we want them to feel that they have been, whether it be abandoned or neglected by the authority, because as I said, it's a team and we are working towards the best interest of the child.
Yeah. And Julie, let's talk about when the child has to be reintegrated to the original home. Tell us how the authority works with that process, and has there ever been a situation where a child does not want to return, and what does the authority do in that situation?
Sure. So like Avion said, one of the things that we do is also provide psychosocial support to that foster parent. So part of that reintegration process, not only are we prepping that foster parent for departure, but also prepping the child for leaving. So depending on the age of the child, we are taking their views into consideration. If a child is adamant, they don't want to go back to their homes, we have to find out why. What's the core of that? But guarantee you, the majority of the time, children want to go home. They want to go back to mommy and daddy, or where they're comfortable. So they work with us. We prep that child. We check in with them after they've moved as well. We're doing visits before the actual reintegration. So we're prepping throughout the way. And whilst sometimes it's hard for a child to move from a home from the foster parent's perspective, because attachment is something that happens, even with relatives. It's something that we do guide them with. We provide that support for them, because ideally going back to their home is what we're gearing towards. That's our goal. We want to reintegrate where possible, appropriate, and in the best interest of the child.
And Anjali, if you would allow me to just go off a bit, what are some of the reasons that a child may enter the kinship foster system in the first place? What was happening at home that would have taken them from that and needed to be relocated?
Sure. In Trinidad, I mean, we see it in the papers all the time. There's so many reasons why a child can be removed from their homes and end up in foster care, kinship foster care, or even one of the children's homes. We're talking, it can be abuse, whether it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, educational neglect, medical neglect. It could be abandonment. It could be because the child has additional needs, whether it's physical disabilities, mental health issues, and the parents aren't able to meet those needs, or vice versa. The parents have mental health issues or disabilities that they are not dealing well with. It could be death of a member of family and there's no other relatives coming forward, because that actually happens more often than not. People just don't come forward, and that's why this is so important. We're really appealing to persons to, take ownership for your family. Come forward, help us support you to support your family. I could also be parents are incarcerated and there's nobody appropriate, or, very importantly, when the point of abuse or the alleged perpetrator is in the home, has access. So we have to remove that child from that situation. So there's a multitude of reasons why children come into care.
I know that Anjali started it off, Avion, but before we go quickly, I mean, what is the reason for the focus on kinship foster care at this point of time? What's the significance of focusing on that at this time?
Well, as we all know, it takes a village. And we want to ensure that if for some reason that a child can't remain with their birth family or birth relatives for whatever reason, due to what Anjali would have stated, we really want that village to come forward. Again, that grandparent, step-parent, brother, sister, aunt, uncle. We want them to come forward to ensure that the child remains within their culture and they are not further negatively affected by the movement from their, again, what they know as their safe space from one person where they would have known all their lives, so whether it be a children's home or any other institution. So we want that village to to come forward, to come together. If you know, or if you have or know of a relative who may be in a children's home and you would like to, and you're able to, and you're willing to, and you meet the criteria, again, please come forward, and we have the contact information that you can call, which is 627-0748, extension 40988, or you can also email fostercare@ttchildren.org. Also look at the Children's Authority website, www.ttchildren.org.
Nice. And the hotline in case anybody needs to call to make a report.
996 or 800-2014.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Avion and Julie, thank you so much. And I really hope that that village and the support that the children need, that they do come forward and help the ones who are most vulnerable. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that was two representatives from the foster care unit at the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, of course, Avion and Anjali, just talking about a very, very important part of foster care, which is the Kinship foster care system. On the Now Morning Show, we're going to take a break and be right back. Stay with us.
Not later.